All right. Okay. Shall we get started?
Let's go.
Okay. Well, I'm glad everybody is here. Just delighted that you've showed up. We'll have fun here for the next hour and a half, I hope. I'm going to go over to the presentation for now, and then we'll take a break in a bit and come back to talk for a sec. So let's do this. You should be looking at a creek from West Fort Worth and the wildlives of Texas reptiles and amphibians. So what we'll do here is obviously learn about reptiles and amphibians. We'll focus on the species found in north central Texas. So I know it said Texas reptiles and amphibians, but and Lord knows if we had time, we'd go out to the Trans-Pecos and cover the whole thing. But we'll kind of focus on north central Texas, cover a lot of natural history, so how these animals live and interact with their surroundings, and some stuff about how to find and observe them in the field. Um, and Whoops. So as far as who we are, I'm Michael Smith. I've been doing this for most of my life. I'd say lifelong. I'm a retired psychological associate, so I'm both. I am a master naturalist pretender. I've taught master naturalists before, but I'm not one. I need to fix that someday, but not so far. I'm not a biologist. I just play one on TV, I guess. I am a writer, though, and especially in retirement, I do a lot of writing. I've written two or three books and do a lot of blogging and stuff like that. So you can see all of that stuff at livesinnature.com. Um, and the uh, partner in this is Friends of Sheri Capehart Nature Preserve, which is a nonprofit organization supporting Sheri Capehart Nature Preserve in Arlington. And we provide things like restoring and maintaining habitat, taking care of the trails, providing education events like this one and other ones. We have an upcoming walk out there for about the yuccas and yucca moths. That's going to be really fascinating. So keep in touch with us if you either visit our website or the Facebook page and get on the list or something and stay in touch. I'd love to see you. So, what about you? We all come to this with different interests and expectations. I'd like to know how you got interested in reptiles and amphibians and what you want to get out of this. And usually, when I do this, I'm live with a group of people, and so we can just talk. I guess we can't like if I said, so raise your hand if that sort of wouldn't work, would it? But what I am going to do is briefly stop sharing. And if anybody wants to unmute themselves and say anything about what they want to get out of this or what their principal interest is in herps, feel free to do that. And if you don't, we'll get back pretty soon. But anybody?
I'm willing to just start it off real quick. I am interested in most nature and animals. Again, I did the master naturalist thing, so obviously I like it, but I
Mhm.
don't know a lot about reptiles or herpetology at all.
Okay.
I grew up pretty much like a big city kid my whole life, so I haven't really had an opportunity to go out and like catch them and do all that kind of stuff. But whenever I see them, I love them. I think they're really cool. So I just want to learn more about them as a grouping of animals.
Wonderful. Great. Glad you're here.
Well, and I can hop on and say hi too. So
Yeah.
my name is Laura Haynes. I'm in the North Texas chapter of the Master Naturalists, and I definitely grew up as a kid that ran around out in creeks and liked that. But I also watched a lot of Kratz creatures and Crocodile Hunter, and I had My long-suffering mother allowed me to buy a pet iguana at age 10, I think.
Oh
And
no.
because that it was the 90s, so that was like what the pet shops would let you was encouraging. And so I got this what grew to be like 6 foot long green iguana that I loved,
Oh,
and we eventually had to rehome it when we moved. But that
yeah.
was something that I think I kind of took a break from as I got older and tried lots of different things, and I ended up working in like nonprofit fundraising for years, and I've been home with my kids, and that's allowed me to kind of really help them fall in love with nature, but also rediscover some of my own interests as I've done that. So, as Michael knows, but some of you guys probably don't, like I've kind of become one of the like herp speakers for the North Texas chapter over the last year or so, and I took there's an online course offered by the Amphibian Foundation out in Georgia, and they do an online course that's a master herpetologist course, and I took that, which was fascinating, but there wasn't much on Texas reptiles and amphibians. So I'm excited to learn more from Michael about some of our native herps, because that's usually what I get asked about when I'm doing some of our presentations. And we there's so much demand, guys. There could be a dozen of us that we're all doing herp talks
Yeah.
for after school programs and for summer camps and for libraries. There's so much demand for
Yeah.
that. So I thank you for organizing this so more of us can learn more.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm glad for any of you that do the kind of work that Laura is doing, um, because I have a really strong interest in nature kids and how do kids grow up forming an interest in nature, and so people being out there and talking to folks is really important. Anybody else real quick before we go back to the presentation?
Yeah, hi, I'm Erica. I'm with
Yeah.
the Crosstimbers chapter. I'm the training director out there, and I'm just fascinated in general by all the unloved creatures, if that makes sense. The
Yeah.
not the cute, the
Sure.
fuzzy, the fluffy. The raccoons get a lot of press because they're cute and everybody loves them.
Tarantula
You
lady.
know, that's me. I love my tarantulas, and I'm fortunate that I get to do a lot of talks around the Metroplex, trying to get people excited about the types of creatures that people usually don't want to be engaged in or engaged with, I guess I should say. So I'm excited to get to learn a little bit more about reptiles and amphibians. I feel like I know some enough to be dangerous, but I'm looking forward to getting a deep dive into this. So thank you for doing this. I'm excited to jump in.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm delighted to be doing it. I every time when I talk to a master naturalist group, I would always wind up feeling like I'm cramming a whole bunch of stuff in there, and it seemed to go well, and people seem to like it. But I felt like I'm cramming a lot of stuff in there, and so I put this together, and I've done it a couple of times live, to be able to kind of stretch out and cover more stuff. And so I'm glad that we're doing this now. At least one of the times was at Fort Worth Nature Center, and each one was paired with a field experience where we saw some cool stuff. We had a lot of fun in the field. So this time it's just virtual. Um, okay, so I'm going to go back to screen sharing and back to the presentation. Okay. Um, so how about that name herps? I think all of you probably know that term, but herps is short for herpetofauna. So I guess, that's it. Well, we'll stick with herps, right? Herpetofauna is a little bit of a mouthful. Basically, it could refer to either reptiles or amphibians or all of them. You might run across the term herptiles, which is like they took reptiles and herps and mashed it all together. That's not a very a recognized term, I guess. I sort of turn up my nose, but then I'm, cranky and I turn up my nose at things sometimes. But so I'm not going to be calling them herptiles, um, uh, but you might run into that term, and that's what that is. So as far as what they are, and a lot of you know most of this, but we're going to talk about it anyway. They are vertebrates, first of all, so they're like right in there with the fish and the birds and the mammals, and they're also ectotherms, which is where the cold-blooded thing comes in. So ectotherms means they get their warmth from outside the body, which winds up being a huge advantage in terms of metabolism and food intake. Because if you don't have to use all that energy to keep your body at 98.6, then you don't need as much food. And so that's kind of an advantage. They're also poikilotherms, which you don't hear that a lot. All that really means is that not only do they get their energy from outside, warmth from outside the body, but they also don't have to maintain a specific body temperature. They're okay at kind of a range. And if you look at a textbook, there's, that range, depending on what it is, like a lot of the amphibians have a range that isn't very high. They don't want to get super warm, and they can tolerate pretty low. Whereas some of the other ones, like some of the desert reptiles, they can go pretty high. And if you get them very cool, they don't move around as well. So every species kind of and every group of herps has its own sort of temperature preference, but they don't have to be at a particular um, uh, a particular temperature. They're widely adapted to a lot of habitats and niches. Um, so they can be found in desert habitats and wetland habitats and prairies and forests and all of that. There's roughly 284 kinds of herps in Texas. Um, and I think I probably got that from a book by Jim Dixon and this latest one with Toby Hibbets doing the photos. Um, and it catalogs all of them. It has really nice dot map range maps, so you can look at for a bull snake or for a box turtle. You can look at in what counties have they been found. Anyway, there's about 284 kinds of herps in Texas. Some of them are in decline or threatened. In that last presentation that we have planned, I'm going to particularly get into that. That one is about conservation and whatever. We'll deep dive into that a little bit then. But the fact is, we just don't know the status of a lot of herps. I mean, it takes dedicated researchers and money to really establish how is each one doing. Like if you say, okay, spotted whiptail lizards have been pretty common in Texas. How are they doing? You don't find them in suburban areas of Fort Worth like they used to when I was a kid, but they're still okay in some parts. So how are they doing? And we simply don't know. Um, but what I can say, and we'll get into this more in the last one, is this idea of shifting baselines. So shifting baseline means how our how our perceptions shift over generations. Here's what I mean. When I was growing up and getting out in the field all the time in Texas as a nature kid, out there just literally day and night in the 60s. And I was seeing whiptails and I was seeing earless lizards and all kinds of different snakes uh, and seeing them frequently, like commonly. Well, compared to that, that's my baseline. That's what I considered normal. That's not the case anymore. But for somebody growing up in Texas right now, your baseline, your experience sort of shapes you to decide what's normal and it's what's normal right now. Uh, and here's the reason it's significant, the reason it matters in terms of conservation is that if you're growing up now and your perception now is that, yeah, you see some stuff, not a whole lot. There's some places you don't see very many things. That seems like that's just if you were going to try and fix things and do conservation and bring things back to where they need to be, you're probably thinking that's where we need to bring them back to. And if you talk to an old person like me, it'd be like, no, no, man, where we came from, it was way back when we had horned lizards running around in our backyards. So every generation has its own kind of baseline for what we expect as normal. Um, and so I hope you guys get your your perception of what's normal as having quite a few, but it won't be as many as in the 60s. Okay, let's talk for a minute about those weird scientific names. I know some of you are pretty familiar with them, whether in either in herps or others, because this is the system that is used for, plants and mammals and insects and everything. So the names of species are derived mostly from Latin and Greek words. And the reason that you might want to use a name like Coluber flagellum is that the common names change. Different people in different places have different names in terms of the common name. But the scientific name is standard, and everybody, even if they don't speak English, would, that's the kind of name that they would use. And of course, in science work, like if you're doing research, you really want to be familiar with scientific names. If you're just kind of wanting to get out and see some animals and enjoy them, and it's kind of, not super serious, don't worry about this. It's not like you have to learn this, but if you want to learn something about it, here's the way it works. There are taxonomic levels of organisms, and that's a hierarchy showing how they're related to each other. So there's, like kingdom and phylum and class and then order. And so with Coluber flagellum, the order is Squamata, and those are lizards and snakes. That's the order. They are in the family Colubridae, which is a great big family of basically harmless snakes. And they are in the genus Coluber and the species Flagellum. And then there are subspecies even below that. The names reflect the evolution of organisms as the tree of life splits into new branches. If you think about it, if you think about evolution, animals are changing over time slowly, right? They shouldn't be like, next week it's all different, but over thousands or millions of years, you have changes in evolution and new species come about, and sometimes old species disappear. But when new species come about, they branch off from an existing organism, and that's what the tree of life shows. So the names should reflect our understanding of how organisms are related to each other. Here's the example I gave. Copperheads and cottonmouths are two species within the same genus, and so they are pretty closely related. So knowing that copperheads and cottonmouths are both in the genus Echistrodon tells you that they're pretty closely related. But copperheads and ribbon snakes are not even in the same family, so they are not closely related. So Echistrodon, the genus for copperheads, versus Thamnophis for ribbon snakes, they're very different. So here is a Coluber flagellum right here. It's a juvenile Western coach whip. I love these snakes. Gosh. So don't get me started. I'll bend your ear all night about how cool these snakes are. This one is a baby from LBJ Grasslands some years ago, photographed there. So if you start over on the left, you have family Colubridae. That splits into several genera, quite a few genera actually, and one of them is Coluber. So Coluber further splits into a number of species. So Flagellum is coach whips. Taeniatus is one of the whip snake species, and Constrictor is the species that includes the racers. And then further from species, if you follow Flagellum, it splits into two different subspecies. So Flagellum, in other words, flagellum, that's the eastern coach whip, and Flagellum testaceus is the western coach whip. Does that help at all in terms of just how all this stuff is organized? Yeah, like you can answer me. Uh, if you have questions about this, you can let me know in the chat. Uh, and let's go on to something else. So let's talk about what good are they. Um, we'll start with what are the benefits to us. The benefits to us of reptiles and amphibians include things like pest control, They help reduce the numbers of what we consider pests, like rodents or insects. Um, even the Western diamondback rattlesnake that so many people dislike, and of course appropriately respect and are very extremely careful because it's certainly a venomous snake. Man, they take care of lots of rats, mice, ground squirrels, all of those kinds of things that a lot of us consider pests. A lot of the frogs eat tons of insects and so on. So pest control might be one thing that you think of as a benefit to us, also as a source of medicines. The ACE inhibitors, if you know somebody who uses an ACE inhibitor to regulate blood pressure, those were developed from the venom of the pit viper Bothrops chararaca, which is a South American relative of the furdilants. Um, so, Bothrops in South America cause a lot of havoc with farmers and rural people who step on them and who don't have easy access to medical care. So that's a real problem. And yet, that animal also has given us a really important medicine for regulating blood pressure. Amphibian skin secretions show some promise in regulating angiogenesis. Now, angiogenesis means the proliferation of blood vessels. Um, and that could be helpful either if we impede it, if we slow down angiogenesis, that could be helpful in tumor growth, right? You give the tumor less food, less nutrient to keep growing, so that would be helpful. Or if you accelerate angiogenesis, that would help with wound healing. You get more blood supply and you get healing going faster. So if those little sort of mild toxins that amphibians secrete, if those help us develop some things that are helpful with these areas, that'd be a real contribution. Here's another thing, and that is cultural importance, including animals used in folk medicine and also in stories and rituals like the Hopi snake dance or the story of the tortoise and the hare. Um, I guess you'd consider the Hopi snake dance as a much more serious kind of issue. The photo in the upper right is actually a photo from one of those, like from it's from a long time ago. You can tell it's kind of an old photo. The Native Americans in the American Southwest, they're not real keen on having a bunch of people come in and be tourists and take photos. So there's not a lot of photos, but this one shows that celebration and ritual. And what it involved is Native Americans going out and collecting all kinds of snakes, gopher snakes, rattlesnakes, all kinds of things, and they stick them in a room and keep them for 2 or 3 days, which probably, if they cool them, if they, I don't know, it maybe settles them down some. But then people parade around with them at that point, either holding them, sometimes holding them in their teeth. And some of these are like, some of the Western rattlesnake species. So that's very interesting stuff, and people have been very interested in how is it that bites are not very common. And then what happens at the end of the ritual is that Native Americans would take them off to the four compass points and release them. And the whole point of it is apparently a rain and fertility ritual, asking for help with the crops for the year. So the Hopi snake dance is a really, really interesting cultural phenomenon that depend on snakes to happen. Okay, and then also groups who enjoy searching, finding, and learning about reptiles and amphibians, and that's us. So culturally, they're important. And then just for art or aesthetic appreciation, like this Texas coral snake here that I photographed in East Texas a few years ago. Reptiles and amphibians are one aspect of the beauty of the natural world. And if you can look at this snake and not think it's beautiful, uh, I don't know what to say. Um, so also, herps have benefits to ecosystems. For example, as food sources, they're important parts of the food web. When there's a large number, a large biomass of animals, that generally indicates that they provide food for many different predators. So there are some places it's been documented that the amphibian biomass exceeds that of everything else, all other animals in forest habitats. Man, that's a lot of poundage, isn't it? Right? These little salamanders and frogs and stuff having greater mass than all the other animals in the forest. But when you see that, that means that's the food for a lot of things. And if they crashed, a lot of other things would crash too. So there are ecosystem benefits that herps provide. And then just the stability of ecological systems. So I like to compare it to Jenga games, and on the right you can see what it is. If you've never played Jenga before, the idea is to keep pulling out pieces of wood and see how far you can get without the whole thing collapsing. And ecological communities are like complex Jenga games. Each thing that you remove, each species or population, makes the whole thing less stable. So if you remove too much of it, it'll collapse. And everything plays a part. So it's not like, it's not just the what we would consider super important species. It can be, things that we don't think of as the most obvious and important thing in the ecosystem. You remove that and it affects other things. So that's an importance. The other thing I want to say about that, I want to sort of rebut my own question about what good are they. Um, a lot of you, probably most of you, are familiar with Aldo Leopold. And if you're not, I hope you get familiar with Aldo Leopold. He's but not a herper. He's sort of like the granddaddy of, natural history and ecology. And in the Round River Essays, which is in the Sand County Almanac, Aldo Leopold wrote, "The last word in ignorance is the man who says of an animal or plant, what good is it? If the land mechanism as a whole is good, then every part is good, whether we understand it or not. If the biota in the course of eons has built something we like but do not understand, then who but a fool would discard seemingly useless parts? To keep every cog and wheel is the first precaution of intelligent tinkering." So we could, so that's worth remembering. Just how we don't necessarily know how important stuff is. Okay, let's talk about community science or citizen science for a moment. And again, I know I'm going to get into something that some of you are very familiar with. Basically, all of us can make important contributions to science, even if we're just regular folks going out visiting a preserve somewhere or visiting a creek somewhere. Basically, community science is when people share and contribute to data monitoring and collection programs. And it could be part of an existing research protocol, or researchers may use the data later in new research. So if we document things and make them available to science, people may use them now or people may use them later. You never know how important your observation may be. There are several places to share nature observations. A lot of birders use eBird. Herpers sometimes use HerpMapper. One of the best and most general is iNaturalist. It's the one I know the most about and the one that a lot of people use. And really quickly, if you wanted to use iNaturalist and you're new to it, you can go to the website and create an account and start a profile of yourself. This is kind of like social media for nature nerds, right? You can start a profile for yourself. Although the point is not to just trade meaningless stuff. I mean, it's serious, but it's also kind of social media. So go out once you've got an account, you go out and find something, anything that's alive, and use your smartphone to take a photo and then start an observation in iNaturalist, upload the photo. The photo should, if it's from a smartphone, It will include information, or you can add information about what you saw, like date, time, location, how many you saw, that kind of stuff, in what habitat. And then you select what, if any, projects you want to contribute the observation to. So, for example, if I see a Texas spiny lizard out somewhere and I take a photo for iNaturalist and upload it, and I will select Herps of Texas as a project that I want it to contribute to so that that data is available to anybody. Now, everybody knows that we've all documented a bunch of Texas spiny lizards, right? It's not like, oh, this the find of a century, a Texas spiny lizard. But the deal is that the number and the timing of when you send it in matters, right? You can from that you could begin to see how common are they? Are they declining or increasing? What's the earliest in the year that people start seeing them? All kinds of cool stuff you can get from your iNaturalist observations. And experts will confirm your identification. So if you're not sure if it's a Texas spiny, um, the app itself will suggest an identification, and experts will confirm it or suggest an alternative if that's not correct. And your iNat account on your phone or desktop shows all the observations you've made, sort of like a notebook. And the helpful information link down there, if you need to maybe take a photo, is for starting an iNat account. Again, quite a few of you already have iNat accounts, so doesn't apply, but some of you might be new to it. All right. I also want to point out a couple of useful guides. So I guess being a writer, it's not surprising to you that I love books, but I really think I don't care how many YouTube videos, I don't care how many internet sites, books are still really important. And one of these is a book I wrote, The Wild Lives of Reptiles and Amphibians. Um, it says a young herpetologist guide because in talks with Texas A&M Press, they were interested in something for like middle school or above. But I wrote it, and those of you who've seen it know it's, it could be teenagers. It also could be adults who are new to this. It's not a children's book. It's just easily accessible if you're kind of new to it. The other one that's a little more advanced is the Field Herping Guide. If some of you are interested in field herping in a serious way and you haven't seen this book, um, I'm about to say, get this book. No, no, get my book. No, no, get this one. The Field Herping Guide, Mike Pingleton and Joshua Holbrook. It is a really fine book with lots of good information about field herping. Now, mine also includes stuff about field herping, some of the ethics, some of where you might go to find stuff, lots of things like that. But again, for a little bit more advanced guide, this field herping guide is a good one. Oh, and over in the corner, just in case you want to know, Clint King and I wrote Herping Texas um, a number of years ago. Is based on 10 years of traveling all around Texas. It's got lots of natural history and lots of photos, and it sort of tells the stories of what we saw and how those animals live. So anyway, there's that. Okay, um, let's talk about some essential skills in the field. And a few things that you want to keep in mind, even without touching or catching them, is about being a good observer. Um, I know when I've been out with friends, man, some of the times you're walking along and you're talking and joking and whatever, and that's fine to do some of that, of course, but it's really good to stop, listen, take in all the cues, and then move ahead some and then stop and listen again. The deal is that, herps are not deaf, even the snakes are not completely deaf. Some have pretty acute vision, at least for movement. So if I'm walking along with friends and we're chatting and I don't have my mind on it particularly, I probably will miss a lot. If they detect you before you detect them, they're probably going to be gone. So be alert to hiding places, basking spots, and particularly good foraging spots. Now, to know that stuff means you got to know, how does the animal live? That's where some of the books and experience and hanging out with experienced people can be really helpful. You can learn, where, like, for example, if you want to see in West Texas, you want to see collared lizards. If you find a place with boulders, that's really good because they'll sort of use that as territory and they'll bask on it and look around from it. Or, salamanders are actually more likely seen in wintertime than in summertime. You learn about these animals and you get ideas about how to find them. So those are a few things to keep in mind when you're in the field. Um, how about observing them versus disturbing them? Now, I'm not going to preach to you, at least hopefully not too bad, because I've been through my time of collecting a lot of animals, and particularly when I was young, I collected a lot of stuff, a lot more than I would today. I rarely collect anything anymore. So it's not like I think collecting is evil and you shouldn't ever, ever do it, or catching them is bad. But think about these things. So you might want to catch them to verify what it is. So if you look at the skink on the right, that is, and now I don't remember if the photo is a five-line or broad-headed skink. It's an adult, and it appears to be a female because the females retain their stripes, whereas the males get sort of bronze colored and with reddish heads, but they look almost exactly alike. A little bit of size difference, but pretty much alike. So to tell which one it is, you've got to look at the lip scales, and one of them has four uh, uh, lip scales before the ocular scale under the eye, and the other one has five. And if you don't know that, you won't know which species it is. So that might be a reason to catch it. And it's just fun to see them close up. Gosh, I mean, there's something magical about looking at that animal really close up. And you might want to collect it, either for a scientific collection somewhere or for a personal collection. I don't advocate that you collect a bunch of stuff, but if you were going to collect a rat snake or a king snake, and you're in an area where it's legal to do so and whatever, then there's little harm in that. So that might be reasons to collect or catch something. Or you might just want to stay still and watch, which I think we all ought to consider doing a lot of. You can see how it moves. Really, that water snake down there, it's a plain-bellied water snake at the bottom, and they are so graceful when they swim. They're just delightful. And they also tend to swim underwater, whereas cottonmouths tend to swim on the top. Anyway, you can see how an animal moves. You can observe foraging, breeding calls. If you don't disturb the frogs, you can hear them calling in the spring at night. Um, and you can avoid stressing or possibly injuring the animal. So those are some good reasons that you might just watch. That lizard on the top, for example, has a pretty fragile tail. And if you catch it, if you're really careful, hopefully you can catch it without breaking the tail, but you might break the tail off. And the lizard, yes, will grow a new one. It will not be quite the same. And there's even some data. This is pretty out of the way stuff, but with some of the lizards at least, there is a little bit of field data showing that they suffer in social hierarchies a little bit when they got a busted tail. So I guess it's kind of like being in middle school and you're different and they laugh at you. I don't know, but at any rate, um, they have a little more difficulty establishing a territory, for example, courting, whatever, if they have a broken tail. So that's a good reason to not cost that animal its tail, unless there's a good reason to. So anyway, uh, let's talk about what you take and what you wear. And this is kind of up to you. I'd wear comfortable and protective clothing um, under shoes. I used to wear hiking boots pretty much all the time. I don't always wear hiking boots anymore. They do give you some ankle support. Most of them that I ever wore are not high enough to give you very much snake bite support, but they do give ankle support. For wading, inexpensive and washable sneakers can be good. I had a friend, a good friend of mine. He and I were out in the field together a whole bunch, and he was cheap as he could be, and he bought the cheapest Walmart sneakers he could find, and that's where he wore what he wore even at night road cruising when you're getting out on the road with rattlesnakes. So, your choice, but these are just some ideas. I like having a hat if it's going to rain or be really sunny. And then long pants are helpful. Any of you that have gone through woodlands and you've busted through greenbrier or in an area with some poison ivy or something like that, long pants it might be a plus. Other people really want to stay cool and wear shorts. Up to you. As far as what to bring, and I'm going to zip through this stuff pretty quickly because again, it's so much a matter of personal preference. But I want to start with water, and that's really something I want to emphasize. You should take water in the field. Even in the winter, I'll take water in the field. But my gosh, I was out with a group once in the LBJ grasslands in the summer, and we all started getting heat exhaustion. Now, that's the heat illness that's not as serious as heat stroke, but it's serious. We were out there on a very hot day. We didn't bring enough water, and we just went from shade spot to shade spot till we get back to the car and get water. And that taught me a very important lesson. And I've had a couple of other lessons from being stupid out in the field when I was younger. Take water. You don't want to get dehydrated. Bring enough to do what you, just stuff to do. Bring enough to do what you need to do, but not so much that you're weighted down. I usually will take a backpack and it's got places for phone and camera and notebook and stuff like that. Insect repellent can be helpful, particularly if you really, really want to avoid mosquitoes and certainly ticks. It's not a guarantee. Don't handle wildlife with repellent on your hands. I've had people point out to me that, like DEET, for example, doesn't kill animals. However, when I asked about amphibians, they didn't know the answer to that. My guess is amphibians with their sensitive skin may be seriously affected. And the other thing is that the ingredient picaridin, which is in some of the repellents, not the DEET ones, but the other ones, has been associated with the death of salamander larvae. So, um, insect repellent and phone or camera, especially if you're using iNaturalist or if you want to preserve some of what you see, a map or GPS. Nowadays, if you got a GPS that's in your phone, that's really good. Get a local trail map if you can. That'll give you good details, especially like in a state park or a national wildlife refuge or whatever. If you can get a local map, that's good. And we'll talk about field notes later. And you might think about a first aid kit, at least something with band-aids and um, tweezers to pull out cactus thorns. Binoculars are cool, not only for birds, but turtles basking, where you need to see them from far enough away that you get a good look before they jump in the water, and so on. Digital thermometer isn't bad. A dip net, maybe, if you're in wetlands. Walking stick or snake hook is good. Um, and a snake hook is, for me, primarily this. Um, if any of you are with me in the field, if you were like in a master naturalist class, I would never teach you how to use a snake hook to pin a snake. It's both extremely stressful for the snake and extremely hazardous for you, especially if you're new at it. So I never use it to pin a snake. I do use it to turn stuff over. So I can turn something over without getting my fingers under there where I connect with the local scorpion or even maybe a copperhead. This particular hook is a commercial hook of like aircraft aluminum and a titanium hook at the end. You can get cheaper hooks. Just depends on what you want to use. For the longest time, I used a hoe that I busted the blade off of. Right, you got a long handle and you got a hooked thing at the end. Whatever you want to use, but you use something to turn stuff over. All right, let's talk about road cruising for a minute. So road cruising is legal in Texas. Uh, this, I, I want to ask you, how many of you have been road cruising? And of course, you can't show me. Some of you have, a few of you, maybe not many of you. I'm going to take a quick gander at chat. At any rate,
I've unmuted everybody, so if you'd like to,
okay, yeah, we'll just take a quick break here if anybody wants to comment about that. Oh,
I've
good.
never been. I'd never even heard of this actually.
Okay, so, well, here's what you do. You go out driving at night after dark or around sunset um, in the most rural roads and in areas that are going to be as good for herps as you think you can find. Um, so in the photo here, you see Megan photographing a herp beside the road at the LBJ grasslands. You drive slowly, so what that means is you want to okay, I'm going to describe how we did it in the old days. There are some legal restrictions now I'll talk about. In the old days, we drive slowly. You always keep an eye on what's behind you. You always pick, you're on a road where you're not going to have somebody top the hill going fast. And the last thing you want to do is to cause an accident. But if you can safely drive slower, you drive slowly enough that you can spot things on the pavement or on the shoulder of the road. And when I was like probably 13, my parents, this is how much of a nerd I was. My parents would drive me out toward Benbrook, west of Fort Worth, because I couldn't drive yet. And we'd find Massasauga rattlesnakes on the pavement, and I would get out and move them out of the way so they didn't get run over or collect them if they were already run over for the museum. Um, and so that's how road cruising works. You get a lot of this out in the Trans-Pecos. Those of you who've been to the Big Bend, that's a mecca for people herping to do road cruising. I have been road cruising all hours of the night, and you can see things active. I mean, Clint and I did one night where it was about 30 things that we found. Um, Around here, it's much more hit and miss, but you may see some cool things. You might see some, cool inverts. You might see a bobcat or an owl, or, a rat snake on the road or a copperhead. What you do depends on your training. I don't want to suggest any of you that are new to this hop out of the car. First of all, you always have headlamps or flashlights, and you look where you step before you hop out. There is a story in a cool book by Whit Gibbons called Their Blood Runs Cold. This is from years ago out in North Carolina, and his graduate students were out road cruising, and one of the graduate students, and I will refrain from calling this person the STUPID word because they're a graduate student, and I'm sure they're lovely people. Hopped out barefoot onto the pavement and was promptly bitten by a timber rattlesnake. And the rest of that story goes on into their saga at the emergency room. But the point is, careful when you hop out of the car. Make sure you're wearing shoes and look before you step. And don't approach too close to venomous snakes unless you have the proper training, and that means somebody hands-on has taught you how to do this. I really don't want to suggest any of you go out finding rattlesnakes on the road and go play with them, right? But you can see some really interesting and cool stuff on the road. It's legal in Texas with a hunting license and a reptile and amphibian stamp. Basically, you go to Walmart and get your hunting license and you ask for the reptile and amphibian stamp. Chances are they won't know what you're talking about, but they look it up and I can't remember if it's $5 or it's cheap. It may be more like 10 or 15. And that would allow you to go road cruising in Texas, but legally you can hunt the right of way, but not the pavement. So, for example, if you were in the Big Bend, you could pull over, park your car safely off the road, and you could then shine your flashlights on road cuts, which is where you're apt to find Trans-Pecos rat snakes and maybe rock rattlesnakes and maybe uh, uh, the gray-banded king snake. There's a lot of things that you could find. So you're off the road and you're shining on road cuts. You're not shining the light on the road. And so legally, it's that. Now you're going to see I've probably got a photo or two that suggests that I was hunting from the pavement, and that's because I have been on somebody's scientific collecting permit for some time now, and that allows you to do more. So, but with the hunting license and reptile amphibian stamp, unfortunately, you can't hunt on the pavement. And I guess these things are about safety. You would have to pull off the road, and I guess you would have to stand there and hope the snake makes it off the pavement where you could catch it or move it, right? Um, Half the time I'm stopping to move something off the road so it doesn't get run over. But at any rate, legally you can't hunt from the pavement. You got to wear a reflective vest like Megan is wearing there, and you can't shine spotlights from the car, which means you can't cruise along slowly, shining a light out of your car while you're looking for stuff, even if you're not shining into people's houses. So that's the deal about road cruising. You can see a lot of cool stuff road cruising. At top left, Megan is holding a small western rat snake that we caught kind of at sunset at LBJ Grasslands. Um, and she had a look at it and then we turned it loose. At top right, the daughter of a friend of mine, our the family went to Big Bend, and we found one of the things we found was a Trans-Pecos rat snake, that beautiful, lovely thing. I know its head's not in good focus. She's photographing that lovely, wonderful Trans-Pecos rat snake. If you can't guess, I kind of like those snakes. And then we turned it loose. Um, and then at the bottom is a Western Massasauga rattlesnake. So that's a small species of rattlesnake that used to be common west of here on the country roads, farm roads, ranch roads, that kind of thing. That photo was taken maybe 2 or 3 years ago. You can still find them sometimes, but not as much as you used to. So road cruising is fun. If you're seriously interested in it, you get to where you're good at identifying snakes and you can do it safely. And then if you get the stuff that you need, you might give it a try. All right, some other hazards to think about if you're out in the field. One of
Michael,
those, yes.
excuse me, just a quick question. Laura Bunton asked in the chat if you need a permit of some sort even to do photography.
Um, so let's see. Here we go. Yeah. So if you are out on the road at night, yes, because if you were to first, okay, gosh, if you run into a sheriff's department car, chances are once they know what you're up to, if they're satisfied that you're not not doing anything harmful, they don't care and they'll let you go and they don't even ask. If you run into a game warden, um, some of the game wardens don't care. But out in the Trans-Pecos region, they're much more likely to care. And if you're out there photographing a rattlesnake at roadside, um, they're going to ask to see your hunting license and all of that. That seems silly, doesn't it? If you're out at a park somewhere, if you're otherwise doing whatever you could legally do, walking the trails and going through a park or a refuge, and you take photos, there's nothing I know of in the Parks and Wildlife laws that would keep you from photographing. You don't need a permit to do that. Does that answer in the chat if that helps or if that doesn't answer the question? And we'll talk a bit more. And by the way, thanks for the note about insect repellent being harmful to the plastics on your cameras and stuff. That's cool. Cool to know. And plastic bag on the hand. Yeah, like you're grabbing dog poop. William, thank you. That's a good point. If you're out in the field and you want to grab a frog, and if you've got some insect repellent, you could stick your hand in a baggie and grab it that way. Good points, guys. Okay, so a lot of you know what poison ivy looks like. The photo at the ends of the arrows, those are poison ivy. Leaves of three. The middle ones always on a stem, not necessarily a real long stem, but kind of. Sometimes the edges are jagged. Sometimes they look like mittens, not necessarily every single time. Now, the photo at the bottom is Virginia creeper. So just so you know, that's not poison ivy. That's a common and harmless plant. Did you notice a little extra something in that photo? Look closely. See if you see a little green vine coming down the tree trunk. So, yep, Eli says. Yeah, so that's a little rough green snake cruising down and making its way across there. Okay, anyway. Also, bull nettle. And I don't think I've contacted bull nettle. I think I've been spared the pleasure, but I understand that it's real painful. So learn this plant and don't bump up against those little hairs, those little spines. They evidently are intensely irritating. Beautiful flowers, but don't touch it. Okay. And of course, among the hazards out there in the field are venomous snakes. So we'll talk in a good bit of the rest of this one about the venomous snakes. I'm going to show you some quick photos. We will go into venomous snakes more in presentation number 4, but we'll also do it a little bit today, just so we've covered some of the hazards. Always look where you're about to put your hands or feet. Don't use your fingers to reach under rocks or boards. Man, I have flipped boards before and found diamondback rattlesnakes under them. Believe me, you don't want to do that. If you're lucky enough to see a venomous snake, stop and then, if needed, take a few steps away. They're not going to attack you, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And in natural areas, venomous snakes are not a pest to get rid of. They're a part of the community of plants and animals. I'm preaching to the choir here. There's probably not a single one of you that would say, if I find a snake out in that wildlife refuge, I'm going to kill it. None of you are going to do that. But anyway, that's the point. Okay. Here's how snakes, and in my experience, and keep in mind it's a lot of experience. There's I guess there's always some exception to the rule, but in my experience, here's how snakes react to humans. Even venomous snakes generally react to humans in this way. It depends on the context, depends on their state of arousal. One that's really heated up and really worked up is going to be a little more reactive than others. But here's what they almost always do. And I'm going to go through this talking about an encounter with a cottonmouth that Megan and I did when we were working on the last book that I did. We were in around Caddo and we found a cottonmouth. And so if the human is, well, first, snakes consider any encounter with a large animal as potentially lethal to them. So if the human is not too close or threatening, they freeze and rely on camouflage. That cottonmouth sat there and did nothing when we first spotted it. It was just freezing and hoping we didn't see it. Then, if the snake perceives that it's been discovered, like when I moved in a little closer, they try to escape and move to safety. That animal tried to throw itself off the place where it was and into the bushes, and I got it with a snake hook and brought it back. But man, it wanted to get away. And it was a big cottonmouth, certainly venomous, certainly dangerous. You've all heard the stories about him being mean and all that. No, that cottonmouth just wanted to get away. And then if the snake is cornered or trapped or perceives an attack imminent, they'll warn or threaten or try to look dangerous. So when I pulled the cottonmouth up to a place where we could take a few photos, it coiled up and rattled its tail and gaped at us in that way that cottonmouths do, where you can see the inside of the mouth. Um, and it just gaped at us. Didn't try to bite, just gaped. Fangs were folded up against the roof of the mouth. No attempt to bite. It just was basically showing us, hey, here's the deal, guys. Y'all need to back off. But especially if it's touched or grabbed, uh, the snake may bite. And I don't care if it's a Texas rat snake, if it's a copperhead, if it's, whatever it is. Uh, if you touch it or grab it, you've really increased the chance that it will bite you. Obviously, nobody is going to try that. But that's the way. And so here's the point. The point is they don't chase you. No snake wants to chase you and put itself in greater danger. They will try to get away. And if they go the wrong way, it might look like you're getting chased, but they're not going to chase you. And they're going to just sit there if you're a little distance away. And you can take some photos. So I want to tell you another story. This is a misjudgment. This is the closest I came to being bitten by a venomous snake in my entire career. I've never been bitten by a venomous snake. I have a field experience with all of our venomous snakes and never been bitten, knock on wood, right? This is the closest, right? So this lovely, lovely diamondback rattlesnake was on the pavement out in West Texas. This is south of the Guadalupe Mountains toward Van Horn, out in the Big Bend region. And Clint and I were driving down to Van Horn. This is during the late afternoon, and here was the snake on the road. Well, like always, we're not going to let it get run over. So we stop, and I go back over to take a look, and I took this photo. Now, I know you can't answer me, but think about it as I talk about this. What do you notice about this snake? Any of you who know anything about snake behavior, what are you seeing? You're seeing a snake that's flattened out, which is a sort of threat posture or warning posture. They flatten out like that, or puff up or that kind of thing when they're under threat. And notice that great big long black tongue, and that was just sitting there. It was not little short flicks. That's that long tongue stuck way out there and held that way. And any of you that have been around rattlesnakes in the field will see that when they're under threat, they will do that. That's what they do. I stupidly didn't pay a lot of attention to that. I got my photo, went back for a hook. Clint loaned me his, which was short. Dang, that was another mistake, right? A relatively short hook. I go over, and what I want to do is just touch the snake and get it to leave the road. That's all I want to do, so it doesn't get run over. So I went over and I touched the snake, and stupid me, I was standing between the snake and the desert. At the edge of the road. I should have gone around to the side on the pavement so the snake would be going away from me into the desert. But so I'm standing in the snake's way, touching this really stressed out snake, and it launched into a series of strikes like I've rarely seen before with a venomous snake. This is the kind of thing that people tell stories about, where it was launching itself in forward with each strike, just striking at me, one after another, and each one would propel it maybe a foot forward, and I'm backpedaling, trying to get out of this snake's way and not be bitten by this snake. He was hot, he was stressed out and afraid, and that's what he was doing. As soon as I stepped out of the way, the snake went on off into the desert. That was the end of it, no problem. So that's the story. Is they'll sit still and hope you don't see them, or they'll try to get away, or they'll warn you, or at the end, if they're really feeling like they're under attack or whatever, they'll try to bite you. That's what they do. Okay, here's a much calmer Western diamondback rattlesnake. So these next few slides are just kind of for identification. If you wanted to get a quick look at all of our venomous snakes, if you're going to be out in the field and wanted to know what they look like, a lot of you already have an idea, but this is a kind of a more yellowish Western diamondback from out near Abilene is where we were. Clint and I flipped some tin. This snake was under the tin. Initially he froze, just like what I was talking about. And then he decided, these people are too close, man. I'm not chancing it. And tried to get away into a burrow. And I used a hook to bring him back and pose him for the photos. And he just sort of sat there and said, "Okay, dude, let's see what you're gonna do. Hopefully there's no trouble." And there wasn't. We took a couple of photos and let him go. That's that's common. And so, and I have to tell you this too. When I'm teaching people about venomous snakes in the field, a thing I always try to make sure I don't do is to give you the impression that it's no big deal, because it is a big deal. This snake, it was a 4-foot Western Diamondback. It would have been a bad bite. We would have needed to have gotten at least to Abilene really quickly, and we weren't all that close, and hope that the people there had experience treating snake bite. And it would hurt like heck, and it would be incredibly expensive, and all that kind of stuff. So it's not a small deal. Be really careful and get the experience and training you need before you do this. But on the other hand, what you may find when you do is, yep, he's just going to sit there and let you take photos and hope that you're going to be nice. Here's a canebrake rattlesnake, or timber rattlesnake. This was this is in Wise County. They tend to sit there like they're camouflaged. And they're pretty well camouflaged in leaf litter and dappled sunlight. It's hard to see. and they will often sit there and tolerate you being really close and not make a sound. Or if they do rattle, you better pay attention. They get big, and it's a serious bite. And we'll talk more in the fourth presentation about each of these guys. But um, you could walk by one and never know it, and it would leave you alone probably, but you really got to be careful with them. Here's a Massasauga. I told you about my parents driving along the old beat up Ford with 13-year-old me, excited as can be, watching for Massasauga rattlesnakes. This is what they look like. They have been very much decimated out there. You don't see them anywhere near as much as you used to, but sometimes you still see them. And they have the prettiest little head pattern. If you look at the stripes and bands on that little guy's head, I think they're cute as they can be. And yeah, I realize I'm biased, but one of the things that you can notice if it's like, okay, it's a rattlesnake, which one is it? That distinctive head pattern would tell you. And the blotches are kind of heart-shaped, aren't they? They're sort of rounded and usually kind of heart-shaped. That would tell you it's a Massasauga. They have a small rattle. You can't see it in this photo. They do have a small rattle. Here's one with an even smaller rattle. This is the Western pygmy rattlesnake. It has a little bit of a purple cast, and that's for real. That's not the photo. They are really, really pretty little snakes, a little rusty stripe down the back and the little black blotches and grayish to kind of lavender. Anyway, they're very pretty. Look at the curl of the tail there. At the end of that tail, there's this itty bitty rattle, and it's pretty quiet. You're probably not going to hear it much because they only get about a foot and a half long. So it's not much good at warning us, but anyway, um, they're not very common. If you see one and you get a chance to photograph it, you're a lucky critter. Just don't put your hand on it or accidentally step on it. Here's a broad-banded copperhead. This is also LBJ grasslands animal. As you get more east, they're more eastern copperhead. Um, so those of you, in Dallas and eastward would have like hourglass bands instead of these sort of irregular bands across. Kind of a orangey head. I think they're beautiful snakes. We'll talk more about their habits, about that heat sensitive pit there. We'll talk about all that when we get to that unit of the program. But that's what a copperhead looks like. They will often rely on camouflage. If you get out there like this weekend and you find a copperhead, chances are it will sit still. These guys can be snappy if they get really threatened. Like if you uncover it and then you touch it with a snake hook, or you shift some wood and the wood touches the snake and it freaks out, they can be pretty snappy. So people talk about them being kind of mild-mannered. Yeah, sometimes, but sometimes they're kind of snappy. Okay, let's talk about this guy, the big bad boy of at least of the Echistrodon genus. So everybody talks about cottonmouths and how they chase you down. This is a snake from the Big Thicket in East Texas. Um, and this was a lovely snake that actually Clint climbed down an embankment and hooked the snake, brought it back up, and it just sat there waiting to see, okay, what are you guys going to do? It didn't try to bite us, didn't chase us, didn't do anything. I think it tried to get away a little bit, but once we got it positioned, once once it knew we weren't going to let it, it just sat there, and we took photos. Um, I don't know what lens I was using. I was not as close as this might look because I do know people who've been bitten as they got too close to a snake to try to photograph it. I'm a little bit more aware of that than this. So, um, but anyway, this was a really cool snake. Um, and the deal with cottonmouths is somebody, well, no, you know what? No, I'm going to save, unless somebody wants me to, I'm going to save that story till we get to presentation number 4 when we talk about cottonmouths. It's basically a field study that people did about, how likely are these guys to bite and just how laid back are they? And basically, my field experience is that they're a bit more laid back even than copperheads. So they're pretty cool. Again, don't take any chances. It's a bad bite if you get one, but um, they're pretty laid back usually. Okay, here's a baby cottonmouth, a couple of them. And I mentioned, I throw this in here, and I'm sorry for the poor photo of this one on the left. It's facing the camera. If you can't make out what that is in the center, it's the snake facing the camera and just not in good focus. So they're pretty reddish and they look kind of like little copperheads. So if you see a small pit viper that looks like a copperhead, uh, if the bands are real jagged and you have more of these spots in here in the dark bands, and if the head looks like that, it's a cottonmouth, not a copperhead. Okay, and then the Texas coral snake. I am going to talk to you about the rhyme that I want you to forget. Okay, uh, who knows what the rhyme is? Yeah, I know you can't speak up and tell me, but you've probably all heard the rhyme, right? Red and yellow kill a fella, and red and black venom lack, or whatever. And here's the deal. And the reason for a rhyme is because there's a harmless milk snake that has yellow, red, and black rings, kind of a mimic of the coral snake. The coral snake, of course, is a distant cobra relative. It's significantly venomous. You sure don't want to pick one up and get bitten. But the milk snakes, on the other hand, are gorgeous and harmless. So people invented that rhyme because the milk snakes, the red bands, are always separated from the yellow by black. So red and black, venom like. But red and yellow, venom kill a fella, or whatever. Actually, as a side note, our Texas coral snakes are not as bad as you might think, and there have been I'll have to look at the studies that I've looked at before because I'm old, but there are either no deaths or extremely few deaths from Texas coral snakes. But we'll talk more about that in Unit 4. Um, so here's why you forget the rhyme. First, any coral snake I've ever seen in the field has been moving. Um, and maybe we can calm it down. Maybe we can get a photo and get it to sit still. But it's almost always moving. And when it's moving, you can't tell what's next to what. Pretty much the same with milk snakes. Most of the time, if I've seen a milk snake, it was in motion. You can't tell what's next to what. And here's another reason to get rid of the rhyme, and that is you notice in this snake, there's a bunch of black suffusing the red bands, right? And in some coral snakes, there is so much black that it's basically a black and yellow ringed snake, no red. So what do you do with a rhyme then? And if you're relying on the rhyme, and it's got no red, would you pick it up? No, you don't pick it up. So get rid of the rhyme. Basically, if you see a pretty banded snake, watch it and enjoy it from a little bit of a distance and just don't touch it, and you're fine. These guys are very non-aggressive. If you step on one or pick up one, you're really at risk. But if you see one that's a few feet away, leave it alone and you're okay. Okay, so when you take a walk, be aware of the relevant laws and what's allowed in the location, like the stuff we talked about with road cruising, or like if you're in, for example, if you're at Sheri Capehart Nature Preserve and you find a Western rat snake, we would very much ask you leave that snake alone. The city of Arlington would tell you you may not pick it up and take it anywhere. That's protected. If you're out somewhere else, if you have permission to be on somebody's private land and they say okay, or in some other places you could pick stuff up or even collect it maybe. But then need to get to know which snakes are protected or which turtles or whatever. So you need to know the law if you're wanting to get out there and pick stuff up. You need to know where to look, like basking spots and refuges and all that. Again, like I said earlier, you get to know that by knowing their natural history. Uh, you, and figure out what can be turned without destroying microhabitat. Here's what I mean. If I'm out somewhere and there's a log that looks great, looks perfect, it's kind of big, looks like it's got plenty of space underneath it or maybe within it, but if that log is so rotten that it's going to fall apart, I'm leaving it alone. I am not turning it because I don't want to destroy microhabitat. Um, if I turn rocks, and my friends and I we're, we're really, uh, we're pretty specific about this. If we turn a rock, we're going to put it right back where it was. So if we're turning rocks on a hillside, big rocks on a hillside, think about it. If it's going to roll down the hill and you can't get it back up there, no, don't do it. Or if you're just not going to be able to fit that rock back where it was. Rocks are settled in and they have a particular microclimate under it, a particular little place that's a refuge for all kinds of little animals. And the studies have shown if you turn a rock over and just leave it, the rock is not just as good turned over as it was where in the place that it was in the first place. They're not used as much by herps, and so you're kind of spoiling the place if you flip rocks and leave them. Probably none of you guys would. I hope that's the case. But there's plenty of times I've been out in the field and seen a series of rocks turned over and left where they were turned, where somebody's just going through trying to find a herp, and they don't care what they do. And I hope that's not you. Um, Also learn how to notice things. This is where it dovetails with my interest in mindfulness, I guess. If it were me, I would stop at a location and I would let go of distractions, stop thinking about where we're going for dinner this evening or what happened yesterday. See what you can notice. Maybe spend 2 or 3 minutes without talking with anyone, just attuned to the sights and sounds and smells. Don't talk, don't even take photos, just look. Um, and that would be a good way to find things that you might miss. The other thing that will happen, I had a friend who one time wondered how in the world I spotted that Texas spiny lizard on a tree trunk. And the deal is that you get what's people refer to as a search image. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but basically it's like you train your brain, right? So if I've seen a million Texas spiny lizards on oak trees, my brain has been sort of trained how to recognize them. So, little irregularities in the shape and pattern will cue me to look at it carefully. So, if at first you got out herping and it was hard for you to spot things, don't worry, keep it up because practice makes perfect, right? You get much better at being able to spot something that other people might miss. And the other thing that you might consider is taking field notes. So, field notes, you- uh, you could do it in a paper notebook, which is what I've always done. You could use iNaturalist, or you could even use video or audio. So you could, take a video selfie and say, "Here's the animal I just found," and describe this. It was an overcast day and the temperature's in the 80s, and here's where we are, and blah blah blah. Um, for me, I would not, if I wanted to find. So where have I found rough green snakes in the past? um, I wouldn't be able to go back and go through all that stuff. Much easier to go through a paper notebook. Anyway, if you're interested, and believe me, this is only if you really want to get into it, it's fine. If you don't, if you just want to enjoy yourself, don't worry about it. But what among the things you could record would be the date, time, the county, and whatever landmarks like, Sheri Capehart Nature Preserve or uh, Bear Creek Road, 2 miles east of Highway 171, or GPS stuff, basically where you'd know exactly where it was. And then the weather conditions, like the temperature, sky, wind, and then what species were seen, including size, class, sex, condition. Uh, or if you don't get all that, that's fine. I mean, if you might just record, you saw a Texas spiny lizard on the tree, and it was an adult maybe, or it was a small one. You may not know what sex it was or whatever. And then comments that could include behavioral observations, what you did, like if you only observed it, if you collected it, whatever. Um, and I'm into nature journaling, and I'm not going to keep you about nature journaling because not all of you are interested in it, but nature journaling is like taking field notes, but you also include sensory impressions and subjective reactions and thoughts. It's more like a diary kind of thing. That page in the lower right is an example from mine where I've drawn some a willow branch and written about what I was seeing. Okay, so um, I felt like I went through that kind of fast, and I hope it wasn't too fast, but I wanted a little bit of time for questions. Let me see if I can bring this down and okay. Yeah, Eli's saying the yellow fellow something. It's okay if you get that one confused because it's really not a good, not a good helper anyway. Um, thank you guys for so those of you that are commenting. Thanks. Let me just really quickly, and then we'll see if there's any questions. And some of you may want to sign out. Um, Next one is on amphibians. We're going to go into frogs, toads, and salamanders in our area with a little bit of detail. We will, the next one after that is crocodilians, but really that's easy. It's just our American alligator. We'll talk about the American alligator and we'll talk about turtles in that session. And then the one after that is lizards and snakes. So we'll talk about lizards and snakes and how they live, their natural history. I'll talk a little bit about snake bite. That one's going to be a little longer. I'm kind of a nut about snake bite and I've studied it a fair amount. And so if any of you have questions about snake bite and snake bite treatment, with the caveat that I'm not a physician, I'm not gonna give you medical advice, but I have read quite a bit, so we'll talk about that for sure. And then the final section is going to be about conservation, and we're going to talk about some stuff that's just really dreadfully endangered. One of them being the Louisiana pine snake, which hasn't been seen in Texas in a long time, but used to be here. One of them is the Dunes sagebrush lizard, which is out in West Texas and is in a lot of danger from fracking and sand mining and drilling. So anyway, that's what we're going to be doing in the coming sessions, and I sure hope to see you there. Let me look at some more of these and see if you have any other questions you want to post. I'm gonna,
And if you'd like to
yeah,
unmute yourself, you can.
yes,
Or if you
yes,
can't, please let me know in the chat.
yes. And Laura Bunton, yes, timbers are also called velvet tails. People who live in the area where they see them are a little more likely to call them velvet tails. Naturalists and herpetologists less so, but that is definitely one of the common names for them, velvet tail. And that's because the tail is a sort of velvety black. Lisa grew up in the big thicket. Oh my God. I am really yeah, I'm jealous. I love the big thicket. I mean, I love it here too, but I love the big thicket. Laura Haynes is talking about the Texas Snake Identification Group, and yep, that's good. Let's see. Um, Thanks y'all for your other comments. Anybody want to unmute and say anything?
Oh,
Uh,
Michael, this is
yes,
Marion. I have a
yeah,
question since um nobody else is asking one.
yeah.
It's I don't know if it's personal or not. Anyway, we were working at the Wildscape yesterday,
Uh-huh.
and there's a group there, I guess homeschooled children, a whole bunch of them, and they're running around out along
Mm,
the fairway. And
yeah,
I heard one of them call out that they found a snake, and it
yeah.
looked like a little brown earth snake, if that's what you call them.
Well, there's a
And I'm
go
sorry.
ahead, go ahead, and I'll tell you in a second what I think. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I didn't do anything. I thought maybe I should, but if I did, I wouldn't know what to do. Leave them alone.
Yeah,
They were thrilled and they were all passing it around
yeah,
and we were concerned it's probably traumatizing it, but
yeah.
I I didn't know if
Well,
it was my place to scold them and I didn't have anything of intelligence to tell them or insight into about the snake.
here's what you could say that hopefully wouldn't be very much scolding, but would be doing some limit setting. I'd go to the kids and say um, that if you pick up an animal and you don't know for sure what it is, that can be dangerous. I'd like you to put that snake down right now, please. And you can look at it, but you can't handle it. This is a protected place where all animals are protected and you shouldn't handle them. And also, we want you to be safe, even though the snake can't hurt you, but you shouldn't ever, just in principle, you should never pick up something you don't know what it is. Um, I would have left it. I mean, I would have gotten the kids out of the way and left it alone. and let it kind of, I mean, especially if it wasn't hurt, just let it kind of make its way on wherever it needed to go.
Yeah,
Um,
I think they had gotten it a distance a ways and
okay,
were running up
okay,
with it. So
okay, okay. Um, well, so there's two brown snakes that it easily could be in the wildscape. And for those who may not know, that's an area in one of the parks here in Arlington. One of them is called DK's brown snake, and it's a garter snake relative, and it is, of course, completely harmless. It has a vague little stripe down its back, and its head is a little bit wider than its neck. The other brown snake is the rough earth snake, which has a little pointy head, and its head is narrow. It's not any wider than its neck, really, and it has no pattern. Both of those are harmless. Um, I will also say that if you go to my website, the Our Lives in Nature, there's a herpetology page and there's some downloadable stuff. One of those is a um, uh, kind of a profile with a photo or two of the I'm sorry, yeah, the rough earth snake, if you want to get a look at what it looks like. And there's also a PDF-free downloadable guide to our area's venomous snakes if you want to download that from my site. Anyway, that's what you saw probably one of those two.
I think
Um,
it was the brown rough snake. Is that what
oh,
you
rough
call
earth
it?
snake? Okay.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Ilana had a question about, does the ribbon snake have any venom that might cause a reaction if bitten? She's trying to figure out if it was a ribbon or garter snake. It did bite her and it did tingle. That's interesting. So what I can say is, Ilana, I hope you're still here. Um, it, some of our not our quote harmless snakes have uh, very mild toxin in glands called the Duvernoy's glands. Um, and they don't inject any venom with any fangs. You just secrete some of it and it gets into the wound if the snake bites you. And I know that I'm not particularly sensitive. I've been bitten by any number of ribbon snakes with no particular effects, but sometimes people get a little bit of tingling, and sometimes people get some swelling and a little bit more bleeding than they should. Most snakes actually have slightly anticoagulant saliva, so a lot of snake bites, harmless snake bites, will bleed maybe a little more than you think, but they're harmless, and I've never ever gotten an infection from being bitten in the field by any of those harmless snakes. But at any rate, so the ribbon and garter snakes have these Duvernoy secretions. There's a few other snakes that do. And the good news is that it shouldn't hurt. This is your daughter, I think, that caught that snake. Um, she was safe, but it's possible to get a little bit of tingling, a little bit of bleeding. Hope that answers it. Anything else or anybody else? All right, man. I'm really glad you guys were here tonight. Thank you so much. And hopefully we'll see you in 2 weeks, right? And talk about frogs and toads and salamanders.
Well,
And
thank you, Michael.
yeah,
That was
sure.
great.
Thank you. Jan, if you might stick around for a sec.
Okay.
Uh, thanks, y'all. I did not notice how many of y'all were here. Some of you are still logged in.
We had 18 at the max.
18. Awesome. Thank you for counting. Okay, good. All right. Well, and you can go ahead and stop the recording if you haven't.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.